Well, hello, everyone. We wanted to have a quick conversation today. There's been a lot of discourse recently about the nature of associations in business, in Christian organizations, in the church. We thought it would be helpful to have a conversation about how New Founding sees the landscape, what crisis we're responding to, and how we think about drawing associational lines. I'm here with Nate Fisher, founder of New Founding, and we want to have a short conversation about some of these issues. Welcome, Nate.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Nate, maybe the first thing that would be helpful to get on the table is explaining a little bit of the crisis that you saw that led you to found New Founding.
So, high level, I think a lot of us saw during the Trump era, during the mid to late 2010s, you saw a world transition from one where I think there were a lot of political disagreements, but in many ways they seemed to be primarily contained in the political domain, the formal political domain, and they were resolved through what seemed like conventional political methods. And we saw that expand to something that seemed something very clearly all-encompassing, touching every aspect of society, touching corporate life, touching tech giants, and very clearly totalitarian, to the point that if you all of these institutions are suddenly pushing one particular political agenda, one cultural agenda, a revolutionary one, and dissent from that potentially leads to deplatforming, censorship, debanking, all of that. So you saw this world where suddenly everything has become politicized, controlled by actors who are hostile to our way of life, and we need an alternative to that. We need a solution to that. And so what I saw fundamentally is I saw disruptive technology. I saw private sector activity and business as offering angles to fight back against that and to challenge that in ways that potentially offer a lot of leverage. Really not just directly in their domains, but to more broadly challenge this trend.
Yeah, and if you try to look inductively at what corporations have been doing and try to observe a principle that's operative, like a moral principle, it seems to be that there are certain individuals who, once they hold certain views or cross certain lines politically, there's like a universal moral duty not to do business with such a person. Like this is mind-blowing to me. As recently as 15 years ago, major corporations, if they did any political philanthropy, tried to be balanced. And it would have been absurd to them to think that, we're going to stop an individual's ability to even have a bank account at any financial institution because they took a particular side in a political issue. For me, we probably all have these catalyzing events. For me, the thing that woke me up to this emerging trend or shape of the predominant corporate culture was the firing of Brandon Ike from Mozilla. I mean, the guy who founded it gave $1,000 to the Proposition 8 campaign. 4 years later, people found out and got him fired from the company he founded after pressure on the board. But we have to realize we are in a very strange place where if that's the moral principle, it's sort of odd because it's like, are you saying this person who hasn't committed a crime are you saying that they should not be able to provide for themselves and their family? Are you saying they should not be able to engage in any sort of commercial activity?
Certainly, there's a concerted effort to strip them of any sort of status or influence in society. I suppose perhaps they can work in some job that has no influence and no status, but it's very clear that there's this effort to systematically ostracize them.
So this is what we see at a macro level. This is the crisis in part that led you to want to found New Founding. How does New Founding address this crisis?
So it's multi-pronged, and I think there's no one clear answer. I would say there's two goals that we have with New Founding. One of these is simply to lay out an alternative positive vision. what can we as a movement actually aim for? Because I think one explanation for the left's win has been this sort of collapse of this collapse of liberal neutrality. People no longer, they've lost faith in the idea that you can have a sort of neutral public square, a neutral society, which I don't think they were wrong to do. The left had a very firm alternative that they proposed, and they have pushed everyone to accept that. The right really doesn't have that. It has not. That's not a domain they were comfortable in. And I felt that a venture firm in particular is very well suited to the articulation of a positive vision. And that comes both through sort of writing and talking about ideas and what that vision could look like, but also what a company, what a startup is in many ways. A startup is actually turning that into reality. How do you demonstrate a vision? You actually start building products. You start developing out marketing materials and seeing what resonates with people. So if we are going to offer an alternative, we need a vision of what we can aim for. And I think New Founding is exceptionally well positioned to offer that. Now, there's the other more immediate need, which is build alternative businesses. If people are being economically ostracized from society, if they're being censored and debanked, we can support alternative businesses that provide services to them that won't censor them, that will give them jobs, that will sell to them without wantonly offending their values with the marketing materials they sell, that'll provide them with content that's consistent with their values. So there's a very basic sense where we need to meet the basic economic needs of a community that is being offended and alienated by mainstream players, and we do that in a way that builds toward a broader, attractive vision.
Yeah. And the community of dissidents, so to speak, from mainstream corporate America is already quite small, even if you don't further divide it. So if you just took the group of all dissidents to the mainstream corporate hegemony, that's really 5-10% of committed individuals, committed consumers that are going to engage in boycotts and seek out aligned companies and that sort of thing. And then if you then fracture your coalition further based on finer gradations of values alignment, you can really get to a point where your movement ceases to have any sort of economic power at all and ceases to pose a significant threat. It seems to me.
Absolutely a risk.
So okay, but I mean here we are operating in a community that's dissident to the mainstream hegemony, and we're both Christians. You founded American Reformer. I'm involved with American Reformer. What is the role of how do you think about Christian values and principles of Christian association relative to our business activity?
So high level, going back to the question of what the alternative positive vision is. I think in many ways, traditional conservatism was often narrowed down to sort of defending a procedural neutrality, defending a system like the Constitution. And as some of that is seen as insufficient, it's certainly not a comprehensive vision. Christianity is uniquely positioned to anchor a full, rich alternative vision, right? In Christianity, we have the cultural mandate, we have the dominion mandate. We're given a vision of what the good is, not just in heaven but on earth, and that certainly provides a wide and rich set of values. And then we have this Protestant tradition, which American Reformer comes from, that has deep thinking across many, many domains about how we should approach institutions. What is the purpose of different types of institutions? So we have this rich positive tradition to build on as we develop an alternative positive vision. It's a foundation that's thoroughly distinct from the value system that is shaping the problems pervading establishment institutions.
Yeah, excellent. And so, I mean, we've had some Christian critics. I think this individual, Jake Meter, has said about American Reformer that we went into business with a neo-Nazi because we've because one of our portfolio companies has a relationship with the influencer Raw Egg Nationalist, I think occasioned by the same facts. Dan Darling said something like, this is neither Christian nor conservative. So how do we, leaving aside whether that's a fair characterization of Raw Egg Nationalist, which I don't think it is, but even just leaving that aside, how should we think about the fact that, in our business activities, we're sometimes transacting with people that do have significantly different values?
So I think the key here is this is business, right? We are building businesses. Who you do business with is a prudential decision. It's one that accounts for many, many different factors. Ultimately, as we think, so several things. First of all, we're directly trying to challenge the left's totalitarian agenda. And when we do business with someone who is being attacked, who is being unpersoned by the left, we are very directly challenging their ability to claim the power to ostracize someone from society. So there's a particular, I think, impact in taking that head on, which is one of our central goals as an organization. Now, I think, secondly, at the higher level, as we think about who we're going to do business with, there's kind of three things that we're looking to achieve. One of those at a very high level is just build a successful business and work with knowledgeable, excellent people who bring expertise, they bring skills, they bring drive to the table, and they're going to support it. So that's absolutely a factor as we choose who we do business with. Another one then is reach a very wide range of people to do business with us. We're trying to build a market. We're trying to build an economic coalition. The more people we're able to reach, the more people we're able to sell to, the bigger our coalition becomes, the more jobs we can provide, and the more this becomes a viable alternative.
And can I jump in?
Yes.
There's an important point about you have to find people who are willing to do business with you.
Yes.
And we're very open about our values. I mean, most of the country who works for major corporations, they need to self-censor, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But here we are in a role where we're out there talking to businessmen every single day, and we are completely open about our Christian values and identity and the fact that drives everything that we do. And if given those conditions, people are willing to do business with us, that's just key, because our identity immediately rules out like a huge portion of the nation,
Yep.
Especially the entrenched corporate actors. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly the point of their censorship. Their censorship is designed to say, if you say this, and really if you're not willing to participate in censoring this, then you become anathema. You become someone who must be ostracized, who must be unpersoned, debanked, economically destroyed. We don't do that. So we have a lot of people who won't even do business with us in any context. Again, good people, a broad coalition of people willing to do business with us. And then to your last point, and I think this is key, we're open about who we are. We're building a coalition, and we're building a coalition toward a vision that we're helping define, that we're shaping. And so our goal is build a broad array of people, a broad coalition of people who we can influence and move toward building that vision. In some sense, in any sense, when they do business with us, they're doing so in a context that is advancing a particular component of that vision. But more broadly, we hope to influence them across the board in more and more ways over time toward a fuller and fuller aspect of that vision. So our goal is ultimately, this is sort of a market, and we have sort of an array of markets that we reach, but it's more than just a bunch of markets. It really becomes a coalition that can help build out this alternative and bring people or organize people and influence people around this alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so, I mean, it's really important. And it's important for a lot of people, like I was until a couple of years ago, who are working in mainstream institutions and really can't say their mind. It's really important that there be a counterexample out there. If your woke employer finds out that you're a committed Christian who holds the wrong views on marriage or the possibility of changing genders or whatever, and you lose your job, it's important that there be somebody like an actual plausible economic force and ecosystem where you can go and find alternative employment. Because perhaps the unpersoning, it started with really extreme characters, but it's getting both broader in its scope and more severe in its consequences. And so, our time, in a lot of ways, our time is short, and we need to gain ground and solidify those gains while there are still people who we can do business with. Because the trend lines in ideological capture in mainstream corporate America are not great.
Exactly. That's why assembling this coalition is so key. As you have a coalition doing business with each other, building relationships with each other, prepared to essentially fork off as more and more of them are ostracized, are attacked, are alienated, you now have a potentially critical mass to push back against that, or to at least build something different.
And so like, yeah, this is the important point when we go into partnerships with anyone. We're going in with our heads held high, open about our values, and freely. But we make prudential decisions about who we transact with. But everybody makes prudential decisions about who they transact with, and even I think a lot of our critics have made very prudential decisions. They are often of necessity or for other reasons in positions where their livelihoods depends upon silence. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is what's interesting is you have people, and I think there's a lot of people, good faith, but maybe concerned. They don't understand it, right? We're doing things that potentially violate what seem to be societal taboos, or we're showing a disregard for societal taboos. But if you think about it, many of these people, well-meaning Christians, work in their day-to-day jobs for companies that are actively promoting evil. They're actively promoting a radical sexual agenda. Obviously, there's sort of more obvious examples, like they're working for a company like Disney that's sort of actively pushing, a lot of what they're doing is actively pushing content that is shaping children in this way. But even if you work for a very sort of vanilla firm, let's say PwC, they're absolutely rife with HR content, with marketing content, with messages, with advice to companies that is pushing this LGBTQ plus agenda, sometimes that are paying for employees to cross state lines to get an abortion. And this is sort of taken for granted, it's taken stride, and yet plenty of very sincere, very good, committed Christians are working for companies like this. And I don't judge them for that. I think that's understandable. As you say, people need to make these judgments. They need to feed their families. What's interesting is we do business with a bunch of people we don't agree with. We're very clear about our values and what our vision is, and we hope to influence those people toward our vision. In many cases, when people work for these companies, they can't do that, or they choose not to do that. And again, that's a prudential calculus. But they're silent as their companies are actively being co-opted by this agenda. So I think that when you look at it at that angle, it's not a binary question. Actually, you actually, by necessity in the world you're in, people are working with others they disagree with. In some cases, pushing things that would be not aligned with their values, but they're doing it as part of engaging in commerce, engaging in the business world, earning an income.
Yeah. One anecdote on the corporate capture. I saw there's a law firm here in Texas called Baker Botts, and this is the old-fashioned mainstay Republican law firm in Texas. James Baker, right? Like the old Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, was his law firm for a long time. A very hospitable home to members of the conservative legal movement here in Texas. I saw on a friend shared from LinkedIn the other day that they are very proudly advertising that they've teamed up with the ACLU to challenge Texas's new law that bans drag shows for minors. So it's just it's an interesting indicator that even this really white shoe, conservative-ish law firm here in Texas headquartered in Texas, is actually on the vanguard of advancing a moral revolution. You can't, if you work at Baker Botts, you can be sure that you cannot take the other side of a pro bono case like that. If you're in the partnership or an associate, it won't happen. They won't allow it. Yeah.
And you're likely, you may not even be speaking up. If you're a rising associate there, you may not even speak up against it. And you know what? I don't blame you. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think that that's part of the world we live in, that you might have to deal with that. Guess what our mission centers on is it's changing that. Our mission is offering an alternative where people are no longer forced to, they no longer feel so much pressure that pushes them to work in or for organizations that are pushing things fundamentally contrary to their values.
Yeah. Well, I think that basically takes us through, what we had to say here. Any concluding remarks you want to share?
So I think that going to just at a high level, I think if you want to think about the range of concerns, I would say there's people who are sort of unconsciously, there's a lot of people who have sort of unconsciously bought into the left's moral framework, which takes certain isms or phobias as anathema, as something that demands unpersoning or ostracism, even as it turns a blind eye to, or even celebrates radical sexual agenda and other aspects that are sort of celebrated by our society. And I think it's very easy to sort of buy into that without necessarily realizing that. It's part of why I want to have this conversation, is sort of highlight that. I think there's other people where, look, we're making prudential decisions. There's room to disagree with prudential decisions. Part of building a business is you got to make a lot of tough decisions with very incomplete information, very complex systems. I don't mind having debates about this. I don't mind having discussions about this. I think there's a lot of questions about how we as a movement should, what our vision should be, and then how practically, even more so, tactically, we advance that vision. That's great, but building ultimately requires making a lot of those decisions in incomplete information. There's obviously the people who are acting in just bad faith. Ultimately, they're trying to destroy us here. They're trying to do something that's much more akin to they're denouncing us. They're denouncing us to the world in an aim to get the world to destroy us. Their concern is may not be Christian at all. They're certainly not appealing to a Christian standard when they try to do this. And I think those people I think it's contemptible. I think it's a cowardly effort to seem pious, but actually turn a fundamentally evil regime against us, against the people who are against us as we are, and often because we are trying to challenge their power and their ability to coerce in all aspects of life.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it going back to the first category of critic that you mentioned, and in some extent they have overlap with the third category, but just to put a point on that, this is the mindset that would get you comfortable working for a company, making money for a company that is funding employee abortions and maybe even philanthropically giving to pro-choice organizations or whatever, like materially aiding the taking of human life in some senses. The company is. And an individual somehow gets, they get comfortable with the fact that I need to make a living, and I'm not the one doing that. This is a means to get a salary to provide for myself and my family. And they get comfortable with that. But then at the same time, there are certain viewpoints that are just outside of the pale, and they've totally accepted implicitly this idea that no one can do business with that sort of person. No one can do business with Nigel Farage, who just got debanked by, I think, Chase Bank. In all of it, it's not just that he can't use his accounts to do, to further his Brexit or immigration restrictionist causes. He just can't. He can't use his money with them for anything personally. He's gone. And a lot of people just unwittingly we're conditioned constantly. And if you're not sort of proactively trying to reset your moral compass, then you're probably going to have some unexamined biases where your moral instincts are basically mainstream society's moral instincts.
And that's natural. That's human. I think that's part of living in a society and a community. So
Right.
I don't blame people for that, but I want to challenge them to really step back and reconsider and consider the world we're in and how it's normalized that. Now, I think the third category, the bad actors, absolutely use and exploit that to try to turn good people. They're trying to sort of they're trying to stir up and foment that anxiety in people, that concern in people, knowing that our society has conditioned them to anathematize certain things, and they know exactly what they're doing. I mean, their purpose is simply to hurt people they want to hurt. They know that many good people, though, will respond in predictable ways.
Yeah. And I guess my closing thought here would be that our fans and friends and followers of New Founding or even of American Reformer in particular, I mean, they should be hoping for our success in a lot of ways. This ever expanding category of people who are subject to this unpersoning treatment by the corporate regime. It already, to varying extents, kind of includes most Christians if they're actually vocal about what they believe. And, very soon it will even get more intrusive in the sense that, what you think or the views of the church that you attend are going to be taken into account. And, us or somebody like us needs to figure this out, and relatively quickly, because, if that doesn't happen, there's just not going to be a lot of options for anybody that's sort of to the right of the mainstream consensus, and especially Christians.
Absolutely, that is what gets me up in the morning is doing what we can do to push back against that, to build an alternative.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Nate. This was good.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep.